I'm a 33-year-old woman, and my older sister Julissa is 36. We grew up in the same two-story brick house in a quiet suburb, raised by parents who didn't fight and didn't yell, but also didn't always show warmth. Our mom passed away from cancer when I was in my early 20s. After that, it was just Dad, Julissa, and me for a while, until Julissa moved to Florida. Back then, I didn't blame her. She was always the one with the big city energy, the one who got restless if she had to sit in one place too long. She started doing real estate and posted a lot about selling beach houses, taking client meetings in fancy cafes, and her solo self-care weekends in different cities. Meanwhile, I stayed here in town. I've been working as a medical billing coordinator for over a decade now. I rent a small duplex 15 minutes away from the nursing home where our dad lives. He wasn't always in a nursing home. That started about 3 years ago. He fell twice in 1 month and the doctors started throwing around words like early cognitive decline. At first, I took him to appointments, picked up prescriptions, helped him with groceries and his mail. But his memory got worse, and there were days he'd leave the stove on or forget where he put the keys. The tipping point was when he wandered out of the house barefoot at 2 a.m. I found out because a neighbor called me. After that, I started the paperwork for full-time care. Dad had decent savings. Mom was smart with money, and he had a pension from his years as a city engineer, but that only lasted a year in the facility. After that, I had to start covering a $600 monthly supplement. I never asked Julissa to split it 50/50. I just sent her the breakdown once a month, and in the beginning, she used to call and say thank you. That eventually turned into a thumbs up emoji. And then silence. Nursing home updates go to both of us, Julissa and me, but she stopped replying to those too. She sent 1 box of cookies last Christmas with a card that said "Miss you, Dad." She visited once in the last 18 months. She spent most of that visit talking to the staff about how much she admired the facility's architecture and how she might invest in something like this back in Florida. I watched her scroll through pictures of new property listings on her phone while Dad sat quietly beside her, asking every few minutes what day it was. I never said anything to anyone in the family about how little she was involved. It wasn't worth the drama. Most of them followed Julissa on social media and saw her posting selfies with captions like "family first" and "caring from afar." She'd spent years painting me as the distant one, always too busy, always private. I didn't realize how deeply that framing had stuck until it turned everyone's silence into suspicion. I let them believe that. I didn't care what they thought, as long as Dad was taken care of. Then, 2 weeks before Christmas, things shifted. I started getting these weird texts from cousins and uncles. Not angry, just cold. One cousin wrote, "We didn't realize you'd stopped visiting your dad." Another said, "Wish someone had told us things were going so badly." At first, I thought they were mixed up. I called my cousin Della, who's hosting Christmas this year, and asked if something was going on. She hesitated for a second, then said, "Julissa told us you basically dumped your dad at the facility and haven't seen him in months. So that you're too busy to care anymore?" I stood in my kitchen with that phone pressed to my ear, frozen. I couldn't even form words. Della added, "I didn't believe it at first. But I mean, she sounded really upset." I hung up and tried to text Julissa. I just asked her why she'd say something like that. She replied almost immediately. No greeting, no explanation. Just, "You made your choices. I've made peace with it." That was it. I scrolled through years of messages between us, trying to see if I'd missed something. But all I could think about was Dad. I'd been with him last week. I brought him his favorite muffins from that bakery near my office. I fixed the zipper on his jacket. I'd sat with him for 2 hours while he fell asleep watching reruns. And now half our family thought I had abandoned him. I didn't text her again. I didn't argue or ask for a correction. That wasn't going to change anything. If she wanted to play victim from 1,200 miles away, fine, let her. But Christmas is coming up. It'll be 12 of us at Della's house, give or take a few boyfriends and girlfriends. I'm not going to get into a shouting match in front of the roast chicken. I'm not going to pull up screenshots or email receipts. That's not my style. What I am going to do is bring 2 things. My portion of Dad's nursing home bills, just the last 6 months, and Julissa's vacation photos. The ones she posts on her public page. The ones with captions like "work hard," "relax harder," and "can't believe I finally made it to Mykonos." I already printed them out. If she wants to make this Christmas about stories, then I'll bring some of my own. The Monday before Christmas, I clocked out of work early and drove straight to the nursing home. The receptionist already knew I'd be asking for the full printout of invoices. I'd called ahead that morning. 18 months worth of itemized billing, payment confirmations, medication logs, and appointment schedules, everything. I also asked for copies of the care log I keep in a spiral-bound notebook at the front desk. Each visit, I write the date, what we did, and any medical notes the nurses mention. They don't require it, but it helps. I photographed each page just in case anyone questioned its authenticity. That night, I pulled out a small photo box from my closet. Inside were birthday pictures, holiday shots, and even blurry selfies of Dad and me in the nursing home cafeteria. I labeled them by date, including one from the day he got his flu shot and one from the morning after his pneumonia scare. I hadn't planned to use any of this, but now I needed it all. The next afternoon, I asked Dad if he wanted to record a holiday message for the family. I kept it simple, just him in his recliner, a Santa hat on his head. He talked slowly, but clearly. He mentioned the Christmas cookies I brought last week and the nurses who decorated his room. At the end, he said, "Thanks to Soraya for always being here. She's my rock." I didn't prompt that part. Back home, I opened Julissa's social media page and started scrolling. I wasn't even surprised anymore. While I was filling out medical release forms in early September, she was posting wine tastings in Napa. When Dad got sent to the ER with chest pain in April, she was hiking in Sedona with someone tagged as a business partner with benefits. The overlap was everywhere. She'd post, "Busy with Dad this week," and then 3 days later, sunsets hit different in Cabo. I saved everything. Screenshots with visible timestamps, side-by-side comparisons with Dad's appointment dates, but Even comment threads where she let people believe she was holding down the fort while I recharged. There were over a dozen posts where she played caretaker online while I handled things in real life. I didn't tell anyone what I was collecting. I just bought a plain folder, slid everything inside, and labeled it, in case it comes up. No big confrontation planned, no announcement. I wasn't going to bring it out, unless Julissa pushed. Then came the text that changed everything. The family group chat had been dead quiet for days, just holiday emojis and reminders from Della about who's bringing what. Then Julissa sent a selfie from a yoga retreat, captioned, "This year, let's focus on compassion and forgiveness. Not everyone is capable of showing up for family, but I try." A few heart emojis followed. Nobody replied. But within 10 minutes, 3 family members left the group chat without a word. That night, Della texted me privately. "I'm not taking sides," she wrote, "but just be ready for tension." I didn't answer. I went to the spare room instead, pulled out gift bags, and laid out everyone's presents. I'd bought simple stuff, candles, socks, gourmet snacks. For Julissa, I chose a ceramic mug that said, "I put the me in family." I added a gift receipt, in case she didn't find it funny. I wasn't trying to start a fight, but I wasn't going to pretend she hadn't made this a mess. On Christmas Eve, I stopped by the nursing home one more time. Dad was in good spirits. I gave him a scarf and showed him the folder. I explained that I might share some of the information with family, depending on how things went. He looked at the cover, then looked at me and said, "If it shuts her up, do it." I got up early the next morning, packed the folder into my tote bag, and drove across town to Della's house. The snow had stopped, but the streets were still icy. I parked a block away, because the driveway was full. Inside, the smell of cinnamon rolls hit me first. Everyone was already gathered in the living room. I handed off my bag of gifts to Della and spotted Julissa near the fireplace, holding a mimosa and talking to our cousin Mira like nothing had happened. She glanced at me once and turned away. She was wearing a red velvet dress and a gold necklace I recognized from a sponsored brand she used to tag. The mug I brought for her was in the bag next to the TV. I didn't take off my coat right away. I just looked around the room. My Uncle Theo waved me over. My cousin Nina smiled but didn't say much. People looked at me and then at Julissa like they weren't sure which one of us was going to say something first. I sat on the far end of the couch, folded my coat over my lap, and waited. The folder was right beside me. If she wanted to pretend I didn't exist, fine. If she brought up her version of the truth in front of everyone again, she wasn't going to like how I responded this time. I got to Della's house about 20 minutes early, hoping to help us set up. But when I stepped inside, I realized most of the family had already arrived. Either everyone came early this year, or they'd all been itching to see how things would unfold. The driveway was already packed. Inside, Julissa was standing at the kitchen island wearing designer boots and a wine-colored wrap dress, swirling a glass of rose while telling a story about her delayed flight from a client dinner in New York. Her voice echoed through the whole first floor. She spotted me and walked over with a frozen smile. She leaned in for a hug and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "You actually showed up?" I smiled and stepped back. Of course. It's family. Della was chopping apples by the sink and glanced up. Her eyebrows rose, but she didn't say anything. I carried my tote to the hallway where the other gifts were being arranged. I placed the bag with presents down first, then quietly slid my envelope of documentation into my purse and tucked it by the table leg. Everything in that envelope was sorted: nursing home bills, care log photos, all time-stamped screenshots of Julissa sipping cocktails on balconies while Dad was being admitted for pneumonia. The rest of the family started arriving. A few cousins gave me short nods. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Cousin Mira barely said hi before wandering off toward the kitchen. The atmosphere felt like walking into a courtroom, except no one wanted to admit what the trial was about. While helping lay out side dishes, Julissa dropped her first jab. She laughed and said, "Remember when we used to do this with Mom?" Before everyone got too busy to care, the room went quiet for a second. Cousin Beatrice, who was spooning stuffing into a bowl, didn't miss a beat. She muttered, "Some of us are still busy caring, actually," and glanced sideways at me. By the time we sat down for dinner, the tension had built so much that even the sound of cutlery felt sharp. Everyone raised glasses for a quick toast, and that's when Julissa stood up, holding hers higher. "To Dad," she said. "May he be surrounded by more love next year than he's had this year." It landed like a slap. No one moved. Della started talking about the new holiday game she bought, trying to pivot the conversation, but no one really listened. Cousin Theo cleared his throat, trying to laugh it off. Then Uncle Henry, who doesn't use social media and doesn't really follow family gossip, looked straight at Julissa and asked, "So how often do you get to see your dad these days?" She didn't flinch. "I try to go monthly," she said, "but I just can't always show it off like others do." That was it. I got up, walked back to the hallway, grabbed my purse, and pulled out the envelope. I brought it to the table and set it down in front of my plate. "I figured this might happen," I said. "So I brought a few receipts." Literally. I started passing them out. One to Della, one to Uncle Henry, one to Beatrice. Each packet had itemized nursing home bills from the last year and a half. Every payment under my name, not a single line item with Julissa's. Then came the screenshots. Dates lined up next to Instagram posts, Julissa drinking champagne in Tulum while Dad was getting blood tests, lounging at a rooftop bar the day he fell and hit his head. There were even comments where people said, "You're such a good daughter," and she replied with heart emojis. No one spoke. Someone's fork hit a plate. Julissa snatched one of the packets, slipped through it, and then stood up so fast her chair scraped back. She knocked over a wine glass. It shattered on the floor. She called me vindictive, told everyone I was obsessed with making her look bad, grabbed her purse and stormed out of the house without another word. I didn't chase her. I looked around the table. "I take care of Dad," I said. "That's the truth. I'm done letting lies win." No one argued. No one moved. Della started picking up the broken glass in silence. Beatrice reached for the envelope and kept reading. After Julissa stormed out and the front door slammed shut behind her, nobody at the table spoke. A few forks clinked against plates. One cousin quietly stood and began gathering empty dishes. I helped Della clean up the broken wine glass, blotting the stain from the rug while she picked up scattered shards. No one said much. People left slowly, some without saying goodbye at all, others offering half-hearted hugs or awkward nods as they grabbed coats and disappeared into the cold. For the next 3 days, there was complete silence from Julissa. No texts, no calls, no social media updates. I didn't try to contact her either. The only thing I did was call the nursing home to check on Dad and schedule my next visit. On the second day, I got a message from cousin Beatrice. She thanked me for finally saying what no one else had been willing to. Uncle Henry texted the same night to tell me the folder I passed around spoke louder than anything you could have said out loud. But not everyone saw it that way. Aunt Marie sent a long message about how I should have handled things like family and that Christmas wasn't the right time to expose each other. Other messages followed. Some cryptic, some too careful. Are you? One cousin wrote, "You know how Julissa is," and another said, "She just wants to feel included. She doesn't know how to ask." One even asked if I would consider apologizing just to smooth things over. I didn't reply to any of them. On Thursday, I visited Dad. He was sitting up in bed with a crossword puzzle, but most of the boxes were still blank. I brought him banana bread from that bakery he liked. He asked if Julissa would be stopping by soon. I told him she was busy. He didn't question it, just nodded and looked out the window. One of the nurses caught me in the hallway afterward and said Leonard had been quieter since Christmas. More confused, less interested in meals, sometimes forgetting which day it was. Later that night, I opened my inbox and saw her name. Julissa had sent an email. It started off overly formal, with words like regret and misunderstanding. She apologized if I felt unsupported and suggested we coordinate efforts better in the future for Dad's sake. Then tucked into the last paragraph, she mentioned being open to taking on some financial responsibility soon, though she didn't say how much or when. I didn't answer. The next morning, Della called. She told me Julissa was spinning the story again, this time saying she didn't know how much I was doing, that I should have told her sooner, and that I'd always been emotionally rigid. She even told someone that I used Dad's illness as a power move. I didn't argue. I just opened my phone, found the scanned copies of the bills and my payment receipts, and forwarded them to the family group chat with a one-line caption, "This is what emotionally rigid looks like, apparently." No one responded, but no one left the group either. That evening, I got a private message from Calvin, one of Dad's longtime friends from back when he worked for the city. Calvin lives nearby and visits Dad once a month. He wrote that he stopped by the facility and Dad had asked why Julissa hadn't called him yet. I thanked him and didn't go into detail. Instead, I sat down and made a list. Not a to-do list, more like a map of what Julissa might try next. The apology email wasn't really an apology. The offer to help with money didn't come with real numbers. The story she was telling people had already shifted twice in less than a week. So I decided to wait. Watch. Listen, I wasn't going to let her rewrite the story again, not without being ready for it this time. Julissa reappeared online 4 days after sending that formal-sounding email. She posted a carousel of old family photos, beach trips, birthdays, a picture of us as kids in matching overalls, captioned, "No matter what happens, I'll always love my family." Distance doesn't mean absence. It was vague enough to seem heartfelt and just specific enough to point fingers without saying names. I noticed right away that a few family members who had reached out to support me after Christmas were now liking the post. One even commented, "This is beautiful, Jules." Family always finds its way. I didn't react. I just took screenshots. Not because I planned to use them right away, but because I'd learned that with Julissa, surface-level gestures usually meant something was moving behind the scenes. And the next day, she texted me, no greeting, just a message that said she was in town for work and a quick check on Dad. She didn't ask to meet or talk. She didn't say how long she'd be here. An hour later, she posted a story of the nursing home's exterior, no selfie, just the building with a filter over it and the caption, "Grateful for the caregivers who make things easier." Later that afternoon, the nursing home called me. One of the front desk staff asked if there had been a change in Dad's point of contact. Julissa had dropped by and asked to be added to the care team updates and wanted access to his financial statements. She said she was trying to get more involved. But I'd already updated the paperwork months ago to make sure only I had financial authority and medical decision rights. The administrator had denied her request and flagged the visit for my awareness. I scheduled a formal meeting with the facility director that same week. We reviewed every document, power of attorney, healthcare proxy, billing accounts. Everything still listed me as the primary contact and sole guarantor. I asked them to keep me informed of any further attempts Julissa might make to gain access or make decisions. That evening, Julissa sent me another message. Long paragraph. It started with, "It doesn't have to be a competition," and ended with a guilt trip about me trying to keep her away from Dad. I responded once, clearly this isn't about competition. It's about consistency. Leonard deserves more than pop and PR visits. She replied an hour later, "Then maybe we should talk to a lawyer and split the responsibilities formally." I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out the folder with all of Dad's financial documents, scanned everything again, payment records, medical forms, guardianship rights. I made sure every page was in order. I started creating a new document on my laptop, a timeline. I added all my visits, every invoice I'd paid, doctor appointments I'd handled, medication adjustments I'd coordinated. I included screenshots of Julissa's travel posts next to Dad's appointment dates. 2 days later, I went back to the nursing home. One of the nurses who'd been working with Dad for the last year caught me in the hallway and said, "Your dad always lights up when you're around. He talks about you more than anyone." Before I left, I asked the front desk for a copy of recent staff correspondence. They printed out a forwarded email thread that had gone around when Julissa tried to request access. Attached to it, by accident or carelessness, was a flight confirmation showing she'd only booked a 3-day stay. She had already left town, All her posts about rebuilding and being present were just part of the image. I added the travel itinerary to the documentation. Then I added a column to my timeline labeled Appearance vs. Reality. It was starting to look more and more like Julissa wasn't just trying to fix her image, she was building a case. I wasn't going to wait for her next move. I was going to be ready for it. A week after Julissa flew out, a certified letter arrived at my door. It was from a local attorney, someone I'd never heard of, claiming to represent Julissa. Inside was a formal request for a detailed financial breakdown of all expenses and assets related to our father's care. The tone was vague but serious, full of phrases like transparency, fair involvement, and co-responsibility. No demand, no legal order, just pressure. I didn't respond. I took the folder I'd been building, payment logs, appointment calendars, care logs, the power of attorney, and scheduled a consultation with an elder care attorney across town. I used part of my savings to cover the meeting. The attorney reviewed everything, page by page, and after an hour, gave me a very clear answer. I had followed every step correctly. I had legal authority. I had financial proof, and Julissa's letter, while intimidating in tone, had no legal standing. It was meant to scare me into backing off. Later that week, I visited the nursing home and sat with Dad in the activity room. He was trying to do a puzzle. I told him that Julissa might try to get involved more directly. He looked up slowly and said, "Just don't let her make it harder for you." That was all. Before I left, I spoke with the facility director and asked if she would be willing to draft a formal statement outlining my role. She agreed, and by the next morning, I had a signed letter on facility letterhead confirming that I'd been the consistent point of contact and financial guarantor for the past 2 years. I added it to my growing file. 2 days later, Julissa made her next move, publicly this time. She launched a fundraising campaign titled Supporting Elder Dignity, with a cropped photo of Dad, sitting in his recliner. The caption claimed she was raising money to support her father's long-term care and talked about being shut out from helping while still wanting to do her part. Donations were open. The goal was $10,000. I took a screenshot and filed a report immediately. Dad had never given permission to use his photo or name for fundraising. The campaign stayed up for 2 days before it quietly disappeared. No apology, no explanation. Just gone. That same day, a mutual cousin messaged me privately, not to ask how I was doing, but to say, "I'm not sure what's going on between you two, but Julissa says she just wants to help. Maybe you could let her?" No one else reached out, not even the ones who liked her earlier posts. The silence started to feel louder than the lies. Then came the mass email. Subject line, "My side." Julissa sent it to every adult in the family. She wrote about how she felt excluded from critical decisions and shut out emotionally after trying to get more involved. She called herself the invisible daughter and said she never wanted a fight, only equal footing. Della forwarded it to me with a short note. "She's rewriting everything." The next time I visited the nursing home, a staff member asked if there had been a change in our family's financial situation. Apparently, Julissa had called again, asking about external support resources for Leonard. I clarified that nothing had changed. I was still covering everything. They made a note on his file. That night, I sat in bed and thought about stepping back completely, letting Julissa try to handle it all. But then she'd get what she wanted. Not because she earned it, but because I got tired. That wasn't happening. A friend who works in hospital social services called me after hearing what had been going on. She gave me the number of a therapist who specializes in caregiver burnout. I booked the appointment for next week. I didn't want to, but I did it anyway. Then, just when things seemed like they might calm down, I received a second email from Julissa's attorney. This one asked if I'd be open to mediation to discuss shared co-caretaking responsibilities. I didn't delete it. I printed it out, added it to the file, and made a new tab in my timeline, legal escalation attempts. My attorney said attending the mediation would work in my favor if Julissa tried to push anything further, so I agreed. Not because I wanted to talk, because showing up would protect me. The mediation took place at a neutral law office on the edge of downtown. The room was plain, quiet, and smelled faintly like printer toner and old carpet. Julissa walked in 10 minutes late with her attorney. She wore beige slacks and a long coat, with a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. She sat across from me without a word. The mediator laid out the expectations, a respectful exchange, a chance to find mutual understanding, and no binding decisions unless both parties agreed. My attorney took the lead. Julissa began by listing her requests. She wanted shared input on all medical decisions, a say in long-term care planning, regular updates, and full transparency on Leonard's finances, as if months of silence and staged photo ops counted as involvement. Her lawyer added that she had been unfairly cut out of the process and wanted to restore balance. My attorney opened the folder we brought. Inside was every receipt, invoice, email, calendar entry, and a copy of Leonard's signed power of attorney. There were even voice memos from Dad saying he trusted me to handle everything, photos of my visits, screenshots of the fundraising page Julissa created without consent, a printed statement from the nursing home outlining my status as the only financial guarantor. The paperwork landed on the table with a soft thud. No one reached for it. The mediator looked over the materials, nodded slowly, and said it was clear I had taken my role seriously. She then turned to Julissa and asked what efforts she had made to contribute. Julissa hesitated, looked at her lawyer, and finally admitted she hadn't provided financial support. She said she felt ashamed after Christmas and just wanted to matter. Her voice cracked slightly, not enough to seem broken, but enough to suggest that maybe this time, she'd rehearsed less and meant more of what she said. The mediator didn't comment. She asked me if I had anything to add. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't go off script. I said, if Julissa felt excluded, she could have spoken to me. But she didn't. She told people I abandoned our dad, and when I shared the truth, she tried to take control through lawyers and public posts. That's not being hurt, that's manipulation. The mediator asked if I would consider letting Julissa take on small responsibilities, like joining calls with doctors or helping plan social visits. Nothing involving money. Nothing legal. I said I would agree, if that's what Dad wanted. The mediator paused, looked at the clock, and suggested we ask him directly. She offered to initiate a supervised video call with the nursing home. I nodded. 15 minutes later, Dad appeared on the screen in his lounge chair. A staff member stood nearby to help him with the call. The mediator explained what was happening in simple terms, then asked, "Leonard, who would you like managing your care?" Dad looked straight into the camera and said, "Soraya has been doing it. I want her to keep doing it." He smiled and added, "Julissa can visit me anytime she wants. I don't want anything complicated." That was the end of it. The mediator wrapped things up formally, saying no shared responsibilities would be arranged unless I agreed to them, and based on Dad's wishes, no changes were needed. Everyone stood, signed the attendance form, and left. Outside the office, Julissa caught up to me on the sidewalk. She didn't have her lawyer with her. She said, "I never thought it'd get this far. I just didn't like being the outsider." I looked at her and said, "You were never the outsider. You just didn't want the responsibility, only the image. That's not the same thing." Then I walked away. Weeks passed. No new emails, no legal letters, no updates from her lawyer. Julissa showed up at the nursing home once, alone, no posts, no big gestures. The visit lasted 20 minutes. She sat beside Dad, brought him a crossword book, then left quietly. The staff said she didn't ask about taking over anything. She didn't mention money. She didn't ask about my role. I didn't interrupt her visit. I didn't say anything. I just kept doing what I'd been doing, showing up. When spring came, the family group chat started waking up again. Cousins sharing baby photos, Aunt Marie asking about summer plans. Julissa was in the chat, but she didn't say much. She shared one old photo of Dad with a flower crown from last Easter. No caption. I kept my responses short, not cold, just clear. By the time next Christmas rolled around, everything was quieter. No spectacle. No show. I brought Dad homemade cookies and a blanket he liked. We watched an old movie in his room. No one brought up what happened the year before. Sometimes peace doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it just looks like continuing to show up, long after the people who lied have gone quiet.